Welcome to the field. My name is JJ. Welcome back to those who continue to keep supporting and watching and tuning in, and those who are listening via the podcast platforms as well. And thanks also if it's the first time you've joined us here. Love talking about the footy, all things that are happening, the big stories, those things that might be happening that are a little off Broadway, but we'll rip in short, sharp and shiny this week because she's all happening. She is all happening. And I feel like we are in for an epic conclusion to the AFL season. I guess we're in that last little mini stretch run towards September. Teams jockeying for top 4, top 2, top 8 positions on the AFL ladder. There's a little mini battle at the bottom end of the ladder when it comes to the wooden spoon as well. So looking forward to getting stuck in. Today on the show, an awful ending from the Bombers and why they should have been better, how they specifically should have been better in the closing minutes and moments of that game against the Crows. Hawk talk demands its place, and it's fitting Hawk talk because these Hawks are talking. They're more than happy to tell you how good they're feeling, how great they're going, and they are going incredibly well. The role changes at the Dogs, we'll talk about that and how it may have resurrected the careers of one of their key players and their coach. So we'll talk about Luke Beveridge and a few of the Bulldogs players. We'll dive into Sydney versus Brisbane. That looked like a prelim final if ever we saw one. And I'm asking Blues fans, are you worried about your Blues or are you bullish about your Blues, considering you are second on the AFL ladder, but the form, are you happy? Are you nervous? Are you bullish? Are you uncertain? Are you unsure? Let's dive in and we'll start with the Bombers and the Crows. It was a genuine classic, not one we expected. I mean, both teams under the roof have got the capability of scoring, but Adelaide have been a little bit sporadic with their ability to move the ball this year, but they moved the ball from end to end freely and quickly. It was like a freeway at different stages, which would worry Brad Scott. But I want to go all the way to the end. There was plenty that happened. Ben Keys was amazing, and Darcy Fogarty stood tall. But there's no way the Bombers should have lost that game. Even when they were down considerably in that second quarter, it felt like an anomaly. So Adelaide, I think, kicked the equal highest score of any team this season in a single quarter. That's an anomaly. That's one out of the box. And that's why I felt confidently that the Bombers would get back into the game. And they maybe got back into the contest too quickly because the Crows were able to steady, gather themselves and come again. But when you're up by 16 points, and there's only a handful of minutes in the game, losing that game is a non-negotiable for Essendon. For where they want to get to, where they've recently come from, losing that game is a non-negotiable. And I'll tell you what, the meeting basically right now, because I'm sitting down on a Monday morning to record this show, the meeting on Monday morning at Windy Hill, or at Tullamarine, I should say these days, would not be pretty. And the leaders down back, I'm talking about guys who have played 150 plus games, guys who have official leadership roles at the Bombers. So Jaden Laverde, Mason Redman, Ben Mackay, who I know has only been there for a short time, but he's that key pillar in defence. He's played a lot of footy. Jake Kelly and Andy McGrath. What were those guys doing in the dying minutes of the game? They had opportunities to bring some bodies back behind the footy. They had opportunities to get spares behind the ball. They almost were even numbers. Jake Kelly was kind of behind the ball as a spare. He was kind of a +1 behind the footy. He got somehow sucked up toward the ball. He couldn't impact that quick kick from Keys that came in, and therefore Rochelle was able to pick it up and quickly snap. A great goal. But there should have been more numbers at that contest. There should have been a goalkeeper. There should have been at least 3 behind the ball for Essendon. And if Adelaide keeps sending forwards around to try and even up the numbers, just keep sending bodies behind the footy. You don't need any or many ahead of the ball if you're Essendon. Just leave 1 or 2 forwards ahead of the ball to fight the fight and delay Adelaide if you happen to win it, and then Adelaide turn it over. They needed bodies behind the ball. They needed to stop Adelaide from scoring. That was their sole job, and they had ample time and opportunity to do so. There were a couple of stoppages. There was ample opportunity. Forget about Zach Merritt. You might say to me, well, he's the captain. He should get it done. He's around the ball. He's trying to win the footy or keep it in congestion to kill clock. McGrath Redmond, Laverde, Ridley, Kelly, Mackay, all of those guys down back should be thinking, okay, we need extra support. We need more bodies down back to clog this up, to give us an advantage in the air and on the ground. Occasionally, or throughout most of the game, you say to yourself, well, we want aerial support or we want ground support. We probably can't get both. But in that situation, you need both, and you need lots of both. It was poorly done. I'll tell you what, when those edits come up on the screen, and I've sat in those chairs and I look up and you see the still shot of the edit, excuse me, as the coach starts to talk and you're looking for yourself thinking, geez, I hope I'm on the bench. I hope I look like I'm trying harder than it felt like I was in the moment. I hope it doesn't look as ugly as it felt when I put my head on the pillow Friday night. But, that was one the Bombers let slip. It was one the Bombers let slip. And they get a banana peel game again this week with the Saints. Now, Brad Scott handles things incredibly professionally. Guys who have been coached by him, say that he is very similar to Chris Scott in the fact that he won't get too emotional, maybe behind closed doors, and as in personally or with the other coaches, he might get a bit fired up, but he's very matter-of-fact and pragmatic with the players. So that's one that certainly would have had him rolling around in his bed, that's for sure. So the Saints on the slate this week, not easy for the Bombers. The slip-ups keep coming, and they need to get that ship under control quickly. The Hawks, let's talk about the mighty Flying Hawks. Are they the second, third, fourth best team in the competition right now? On exposed form, since their Zip and 5 start, they are one of the best performed teams in the game. So they started the season off Zip and 5. They looked god-awful. They had holes all over the place in the front end, in the back end, and they looked terrible. I was at the game when they got their first win of the season against the Roos, and they did hammer the Roos. They did really kickstart their season on the back of that, and they've gone 10-3 since, which should have been 11-2. Hawks fans will know that more than me. The loss to Port Adelaide was unthinkable. So they should be 11-2 since their Zip and 5 start. They're 10-3, which is still incredibly dominant. And I've spoken about this before, I absolutely love the group of Ginnivan, Moore, McDonald, Ward, Watson, and the vet Luke Bruce still getting it done. Kick 4 on the weekend. It's such a potent group of players. All those guys are hard-running, hard-working. They get up the ground. They help the team defend, and then they get back to goal as quick as possible. There's plenty of guys in that group who are really mercurial and creative. They can create scores for themselves. They can create scores for others. It's a bit of a weapon for this Hawthorn outfit. They are undersized down back. They're a bit undermanned up front, but I tell you what, they're a dangerous group. They're in form. They're feeling themselves, and that's an important part of it as well. And they're a team you probably don't want to see on the run into September. They feel like they can make it, and they feel like they can do some damage. And that is, who are we to say they can't? Because aside from the Zip and 5 start, they've looked as good as anyone else in the competition. So we'll see how far they can go. I was there on Saturday night as the Dogs dismantled Geelong at the Cattery. It was wet. It was rainy. It was a bit of a throwback. Geelong had the retro jumpers on. And I'll tell you what, the oval, the surface was a bit retro as well. She was nice and muddy. But about 2 months ago, I reckon Luke Beveridge was gone, right? He was out the door. We were saying, well, the Dogs are going to finish 11th or 12th, and Luke Beveridge will be on his bike. And Rory Lobb came out and offered to be on his bike. He came out via his manager, and the reports were that he was going to leave because the Dogs largely hadn't held up their end of the bargain in terms of the role he was going to play and how he was going to be utilised. But I guess more so through desperation than desire, Lobb has gone to defence. And on Saturday night, watching him closely against the Cats, and I understand Tom Hawkins wasn't there, and it was just Jeremy Cameron mainly as a tall target. He was incredible, Lobb. 21 disposals at 95% effectiveness. That's 20 of 21 were effective in the slot, in the slipperiness. He took 9 marks. He had 14 intercept possessions, including 6 intercept marks on a night where it was difficult to mark the footy. What stands out for me, we understand he's a great mark. He's 207 centimetres. He can mark the footy, always has been able to, has always been high up when it comes to contested marks per game. But what stood out to me with Rory Lobb was his ability to make great decisions with ball in hand. And you can think of half a dozen great interceptors around the competition who'll take an intercept mark, but they don't use the ball very well. In fact, they use the ball quite poorly. They'll mark it and go straight back down the line or kick it sideways or backwards. He has an ability to make good decisions and to execute and to back himself. I was really surprised at his ability to use the ball, to go for his kicks, to make things happen once he'd actually won the ball back. So he was superb. Buku Kamas as well. He needs some more love. I was probably putting the cools on the slows on him last week. People were getting up and excited about his job on Charlie Curnow. Curnow did kick 3 goals, 7. So did have a big day at the office, but Kamas was dominant this week. 9 intercepts, 5 intercept marks of his own, and completely handled the Geelong forward group. They left out Shannon Neal, and I want to say this on here. When it gets wet, there's a common view that leaving out a tall is the way to go, or going small is the way to go. I find that being taller or having your tools becomes more important in the rain than not, because the ball gets kicked long down the line to big contests more often. Now you say, well, it's harder to mark it. You won't mark it at all. That's true. But even controlling those aerial situations is important. So not allowing Rory Lobb to punch it 25 metres over the fence or back toward his own goal. That's important. Being able to get that ball to spill and keep dribbling and running toward your goal is important. And the other element is the ball leaves a contest a lot slower. So big guys, I think, are less exposed, particularly when the ball's on the ground inside forward 50 and plenty of space. You know, typically, you know, that might get picked up and just absolutely run away by a Bailey Dale or an Ed Richards, but the ball leaves the area a little bit slower. So I think probably leaving out Shannon Neal, even though he's no superstar at this early stage of his career, I think was probably a mistake from the Cats. And I'm certainly in the camp that when it's wet, don't get rid of your big guys. You might need them even more. Health is wealth in all sports. I'll tell you what, that doesn't just be or look the case for the AFL. Health is wealth. And Sydney have been healthy, and they've been very, very wealthy this season. But in that loss to Brisbane, Tom Papley went down with what looks to be maybe a syndesmosis, an inside high ankle sprain. They're not good. He was straight into the moon boot, couldn't put much or any weight on that ankle, so he might be missing some time. Dane Rampy looks to have pinged a calf or pinched a calf at least. So he was out of the game straight away, and we know Will Hayward was running around with a bit of a wobbly ankle. He should be either fine this week or next. But no Papley and no Rampy for at least the short to medium term. That's a concern. They rested Callum Mills, which was a wise decision. First up off the best part of 12 months. Give him a week off and allow him to just get himself re-established and refreshed for the last part of the season. But the Swans have had them all available. Now they've got a couple of key personnel out. It'll be fascinating to see, A, how they handle it, B, whether they cop any more injuries, and C, whether they start to manage some of these guys who have had big loads. Brodie Grundy didn't play a lot of AFL footy last year, has had a massive and monstrous load this year. Do they give him a week off? Does Warner get a spell? Does Goulden, who has just run up and down the wing, up and down the ground all season long, does he need a break? What about Nick Blakey? Could he do with a spell? All these questions will be things and thoughts will be things that the Swans coaching staff are starting to talk about, because they are established in the top 2. There'll be a team having to go to the SCG in the first week of the finals, and that's going to be a tough situation. But if you've got players who are weary and worn out and mentally fatigued, and you'll tell me, well, there's a bye before the finals, but it might be too late. It's a build-up. It's just a constant grind, and maybe by the time you get to that bye before the finals, it's too little too late. So it'll be fascinating to see how they go. In terms of the game, just loved Brisbane's willingness to stay in the fight, to stay engaged in the contest. They were dominant early. We know Sydney start games slowly. They're always going to come back into the contest. Warner and Goulden, Heaney got himself involved. Logan McDonald was dangerous. Hayward stood up even though his ankle was clearly bothering him. So the Swans did what they do. But in the end, Brisbane Cam Rayner, he's had his knockers, and I've defended him on this show before. And I tell you what, feeling like a proud cousin. He had the best part of 20 disposals, kicked a couple of great goals, set a couple of others up. He is talking about the Hawks feeling themselves. He is feeling himself, and he should be, because he's a weapon of destruction. I love the work around the footy of some of their, I guess, second string midfielders. Hugh McCluggage was absolutely huge. 26 disposals, kicked 3 goals. Dunkley getting after them, setting the tone, keeping Heaney for large parts out of that game. That was huge. Even some of the young players I thought were really good. Wilmot was good. Jasper Fletcher had his moments. So the Lions, they look like the number 2 seed at the moment. Carlton, who we'll get to in a moment, are number 2 on the ladder. But I tell you what, Brisbane are coming, and they are coming hard. Speaking of the Blues, before we get out of here, if you're a Blues fan, are you bullish or are you nervous? That's my question to you. You squeaked past the Roos under the lid, and we know the Roos are so much more than what they've been over the past few years. The bonus was you got 8 goals from Owies, Motlop and Fogarty. I'm not sure whether you'll get 8 between them in a game again this season, but you did. You kicked 107 points, so 16, 11, 107. You do that most weeks and you win most weeks. But you conceded 100-plus marks to the Kangas. You couldn't get the ball off them, and you couldn't get ascendancy around the footy or in regards to field position either. So some major issues in that space. Tom de Koning was walking around looking sore and sorry for himself. Harry Mackay the same. And that Mackay situation, that needs to be solved straight away, not necessarily a shot at Carlton. The independent doctor needs to be instituted immediately, and it needs, or that person needs, a direct line of communication to the umpire, and the communication is as it is in the NRL. I'll spit that out. The independent doctor says this player has a head knock. It needs to be removed from the field, assessed, and TBC whether he can come back on. The umpire simply blows his whistle, stops the game, and that player walks from the field. Exactly in the manner that a player does with a blood rule. It takes too long. It's too difficult for doctors and physios to be able to get out there and talk to a player in the heat of battle whilst the player's trying to shrug them off and there's a ball flying around. In these days, players at one end of the ground, they're not standing 150 metres from the ball with 10 or 20 seconds to chat to a doctor. They're always expected to be engaged in the game. So I think the independent doctor needs to be able to stop the game, talk to the umpire, say, get him off, and that's exactly what happens. Anyway, back to the Blues. It's been a while. I was going back through their games last night, and it's been a while, I think back to round 15 probably against Geelong, where Carlton put in a dominant 4-quarter performance. Now, I understand it's difficult to dominate for 4 quarters. It's difficult to dominate a game at all. But it's been a few weeks now since we've seen them at their absolute best. Walsh has been good but not great. He's been, held in stages of games. Cripps has been unbelievable. Curno's productive on the stat sheet, but I don't know if he's taken over. Mackay's productive, but he's not taking over games. Chera's trying to get himself into the mix, playing a little bit more half-back than midfield. The Hollands boys are going okay without going great. I think that the Blues are all, maybe at about 90% collectively. And that's all it takes sometimes for a team to perform just a little bit less than their absolute optimum. So that's why I'm wondering, and I'm unsure about if I were a Blues fan, would I be nervous or would I be bullish? Would I be bullish about the upside we've still got and the foundation we've laid for ourselves, or would I be nervous because I'm not seeing the same Carlton I saw in the middle part of the season when they were absolutely steamrolling good teams? That's the question for me this week about the Blues. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about Carlton and any other team across the competition. How many teams do you think can win the premiership? I'm thinking Sydney can, Brisbane can, Carlton can, and I might wind it up there. I don't know if GWS can win it. Maybe they can. Maybe they're the 4th team who could. But from there on, I don't see a team that can contend. Geelong, I doubt it, particularly if they finish in positions 5 to 8. Fremantle, maybe. I said they could about 6 or 8 weeks ago. So maybe they can, but I'm just not sure. Who do you think can win the premiership from here? Let us know this week on the Channel 7 AFL socials. Plenty to have a look at there. So make sure you jump on there, having a look at big Rory Lobb and his ability to both mark the ball and kick the ball. What a stroke of genius from the Bulldogs coaching group. That's been Rory Lobb down back, Buku Karmas down back. They look like absolute stars, those two. They look like they've been playing together for a long, long time. So round 19's in the books. Round 20 starts with Port Adelaide and Carlton on Friday night at Marvel Stadium. You can see that game live on Channel 7. And we'll keep enjoying the footy. Round 20, not far away. As always, thanks for watching.